All right, so the government won't let this manga get an anime. I guess we're about to talk about some controversial manga. Let's get it.
Takeo Sarada, former Japanese Minister of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism.
Man, he
Tetsuya
had a
Gamon,
lot
former
of
Minister of Transport.
jobs.
Yoshihisa Mirokawa, former Chief Cabinet Secretary of Japan. And Genzo Michinaga, President of Japanese Public Highway Corporation. The people I listed do not go by these names. These are the names given to them in a manga. One where they are each
Oh,
brutally murdered one by one in flashy style along with other people in the Japanese government at the time this manga was being made, or that hold high status in wealthy companies. That's like if instead this was Borj Jush, Beth Jezos, Arak Babama, and Panty Nalos companies. That's like if instead this was Borj Jush, Beth Jezos, Arak
Ozma
Babama,
from Baki.
and Panty Nalosi. Like, sure, they go by different names, but you know who this is and the important positions they hold. Yes, this manga is about a vigilante cleaning house in Japan in an effort to do one thing and one thing only. Akumetsu has
Destroy
162 chapters and is one of my favorite series ever made, so consider this a Hail Mary to try and get it some more recognition. It's a rather fast-paced manga despite the amount of dialogue it has in certain chapters. They're rather short chapters after the first few, so it shouldn't take anyone too long to read it. It begins with a girl kissing a boy in her class as a final confession. The boy's name is Sho. This is the main character of our story and one of the most charismatic characters in manga, period. The girl goes off to earn money by giving into prostitution for this old dirtbag and a bunch of other old men who are a part of a semi-governmental corporation. The main one with the panties on his head, I believe, was based on Haruhiko Kuroda, but I'm not entirely sure. For context to what I'm about to say next, a billion yen is worth 6 million US dollars today. All of these men will be receiving a retirement of 1 billion yen, with the main one receiving 2 billion yen, while living in a house that costs 6 billion yen. This meeting these men are having while being on overtime pay is being spent on prostituting high school Japanese girls while the country is experiencing a debt of 700 trillion yen. Before the girls can get humiliated even more, Akumetsu pops up and shoots one of the men in the leg. They all believe he's a common thief who doesn't know who he's dealing with. They demand he states his name and he responds Akumetsu. The girl immediately recognizes the masked man's voice, realizing it's Sho. Akumetsu then points a gun at the windbag regardless and tells him he has some questions, and depending on how he answers, it will indeed be his final answer. I've made the smooth brain comparison in the past that Akumetsu is like Light Yagami, but instead of a god complex, he's a comedic troll with a gun instead of a death note. And for whichever individual is about to tell me that Light Yagami didn't have a god complex, literally just reread the first chapter of Death Note. I'm not finna see another comment like that again.
Wait, there are people arguing that Light Yagami, the guy that said he will be the god of the new world, does not have a god complex? Are you dumb? Yes, you are.
Akumetsu asked the old pervert 4 questions. The first being, can 10 million yen kill a person? The faces Akumetsu makes while asking this type of stuff is gold. He then tells a story about a man who was denied a loan of 10 million from the bank the old Kuda is a part of to replenish his stock, and then hung himself. He then asks, who does the money you steal belong to? The senior citizen says no one. He's paid by the government, and Akumetsu contemplates it for a moment, and then shoots his toe off. I'm not advocating for this, but if my chemistry teacher was asking questions like this with this type of methods, my grade would have either have been a lot better or I wouldn't be here. Akumetsu says, I didn't ask you to talk back. What I'm asking about is your stealing. He puts the gun to the elderly fuck's head and presses him about where he really gets his money, until the gray-haired bastard admits it's from taxes. Akumetsu tells him he's correct and then shoots a man charging at him. The third question is, how many people can 300 million yen save? The answer comes from the story of the man who hung himself. 30 people can be saved, which means the wrinkled wretch killed 30 people and therefore deserves death. And then he asks the final question.
That's deep.
After all evil people in this world are dead, will this world be peaceful? The 1 foot in the grave guy pissing and crying says there are already plenty of more evil individuals, and there will always be more no matter how many he kills. Akumetsu laughs and says, so I'll kill them too.
I figured he'd say something like that.
The one that destroys evil, that's right, that's Akumetsu. And kills the former chief of finance by splitting his head open.
It's crazy, good and evil, of course, are subjective, man. But there's no doubt that there are some evil people that have a lot of money. At the same time, going around just killing people probably ain't the answer. It is a answer, but it probably ain't the answer. But it's a manga, so I guess, fuck it, we ball.
Open with an axe. The cherry on top is as Akumetsu leaves with the dead body, he's then shot by the cops, and right after the mask explodes, blowing his head off.
Oof.
Understandably traumatized, the girl goes to school the next day, and as if nothing happened, Sho screams he's sorry for being late, sits at his desk,
Bro
and
got
nonchalantly
regeneration
winks at the girl. The
powers.
manga only gets crazier from here, trust me. Sho's personality is often seen in these two shades, the serious bringer of justice like the Punisher, and the jovial class clown performer. I've likened him to Deadpool in the past, but with the games he likes to play with the people he kills, it gives off a similar vibe to Jim Carrey's performance as the Riddler. The overly expressive faces straight out of a comedy cartoon to break tension and make light of interactions from other characters is a really nice touch, honestly, since this shit can get very intense for long stretches, especially since it delves into very real-world issues at times while using an over-the-top
Interesting.
approach that is allowed to describe at the very least, such as blackmailing the Prime Minister and teaming up with him to help start a legitimate reform, and drawing a line telling the police that for every gang member that crosses that line, he's going to shoot off the police chief's fingers.
Oh
Throughout the
man.
manga, he presses individuals who play a role in putting Japan in the state that it's currently in, whether that is slicing a man up with a samurai sword after giving a speech about how the banking system and the way politicians abuse it need to be handled, or letting his mascot, Ametsu, explain the fault with the financial institutions, and how the banks don't keep their promises and uses a fire hose along with 27 other types of weapons to
I think I get what the mangaka, right? The mangaka, that's the person that creates the manga, right? I think I get what they're trying to do. They're using extremes and they're using their art to explain the situation that is happening in the reality. It is definitely a deep and impactful message, and I'm honestly surprised that the manga got 160 copies, and I am not surprised that it's not getting an anime, but these are things that definitely should be talked about. But this is an interesting way to talk about it.
the banks don't keep their promises and uses a fire hose along with 27 other types of weapons to kill these individuals. Every time he kills, he also dies with the mask blowing up. Again,
Okay.
need I remind you, these are, like, all the people you're seeing being drawn in this manga, at
These
least
are
for the
based off
most
real
part,
people.
all based on real individuals within the system of Japan. The origins
That's pretty
behind his
big.
powers and how there are
That's
multiple of
pretty
him in
big,
different
man.
locations at the same time, I think
Okay.
ties in really well with his master plan, and more on that later, but I think you can see why I doubt this series will ever get an anime. It is not a new
course.
trendy series to start off with. This was made back in early 2000s, and I don't know what studio would take the risk of adapting that, as well as a series about killing real Japanese politicians and businessmen, while some of them are still active in different positions. Personally, I think the controversy of it and the discussion surrounding the character would make them bank, but it seems a lot of studios are content pumping out rehashes of My Life in A or As A in Another World. Unlike other series like Vagabond, Climber, Innocent, etc., where adapting the art style of those series would be difficult in a way, I think the art style of Akumetsu could translate beautifully if they don't just CGI the whole thing. There are anime that
Which
delve
they
into
probably would.
insane premises and concepts, but for one, let's be honest, Japan is weird in some ways, and at least they can somewhat draw
What
the
was that?
line at this is very separate from reality. When it comes to the concept of Akumetsu and what it delves with, not so much. The fashion in which these kills are carried out is what gives the manga a bit of its identity while asking the question of the people in the story and in the audience: if you had the power to destroy evil that was making your family and neighbors suffer, would you? And again, this isn't some abstract alien.
Mhm. If you had the power to destroy evil, hmm, it's a slippery slope, man. It's definitely a slippery slope. Hmm.
That was making your family and neighbors suffer, would you? And again, this isn't some abstract alien. This is a legit critique at many times of the Japanese government. He treats all of these like a game show, and the author becomes less and less subtle about the people that are being killed by the 90 chapter mark, and the methods become more and more over the top. Whether it's burning down someone's home, having a death race, or burying them alive underneath the highways they love so much. The deaths start to be a reflection of the corrupt manners in which they live their lives, kind of like the Saw films, as well as the story does a good job of addressing evil across the board, and not just in a political sense. Although it is undeniable that this story has political themes, of course, and it's safe to say the author is not fond of these people, the overall idea, I think, is addressing the evil we share as a whole and what we can do to change it, especially considering the consequences of the aftermath, where in an attempt to get rid of a monster, we might bring rise to an even bigger one. There can be a
100%.
conversation in regards to politics in relation to real life, but I'm not well educated enough on those matters, and who wants to hear an Anituber's opinion on this shit? what is this, Twitter?
I'd
Plus,
listen
morality
to
when
it
it comes to
if it
stories
was
and blurring the lines
well critiqued.
with reality is a mess as a whole, since there are people who go to disturbing lengths to defend characters like Griffith, so I doubt they would concede that Akumetsu is clearly a morally gray vigilante, and not an outright hero that is purely a political statement. Sure, is he as bad as the slime balls presented to us in the story? Probably not, but he still feels obligated within the story to die as well after committing what is terrorism-based murders. Akumetsu even makes an example of someone who pretends to be him to assassinate someone as they are unwilling to give their life for it. The entire scene is absolutely insane.
So that's the thing, right? Whenever there's anything regarding taking somebody else's life in the pursuit of justice, you're 9 times out of 10 gonna end up losing your life. It's just how it works.
And probably the most memorable part of the manga outside of the backstory to Akumetsu is he puts a real Akumetsu mask on the man who was pretending and tried to snipe somebody and straps him to a wheelchair as he invades a news broadcast of a political debate, pressing a button which leads closer to the detonation of the mask if he doesn't like the questions being asked. I also love how it shows the network keeping the broadcast up because of how good it's doing for their ratings, regardless of whether or not it's okay or not to keep it going. The host says that Akumetsu is a terrorist due to his actions and methods, and Akumetsu happily agrees, and with the same smile on his face agrees that he is a hypocrite. It is indeed cruel, too cruel. I surely must be evil. The people say he should be punished, and he responds that's what he's been doing from the very start. Seems you already forgotten. We Akumetsu execute ourselves every single time. Our slogan of one man, one assassination. If we don't die as well, we ain't a bona fide suicide squad, meaning it's a W execution of evil. This man was speaking to a Twitch chat that didn't.
That's insane, bro. That is absolutely insane. So yeah, right. Whenever we talk about taking out evil, right? Whenever the question is, are you willing to take out evil or stop evil whenever the evil is personified in another human being, right? You take that person out. What's stopping you from becoming evil as well? You say you kill everybody that's evil, right? Like Yagami, a guy who wanted to seek justice and kill all the bad people in the world and then became a tyrant himself. So to have this is like honestly the most morally right, and of course morality is subjective, but this, like, in my perspective, this is like the most morally right thing for to happen, right? You take out somebody that is evil and then you yourself are taken out and you know that this will happen. That's basically a sacrifice. You're like, I'm gonna take this evil person with me because I myself might become evil. It's pretty deep, honestly.
Squad,
it's crazy,
meaning it's a W execution of evil.
Insane.
This man was speaking to a Twitch chat that didn't even exist yet. He continues by stating he does not believe his actions are correct or justifiable, but if not, he is willing to do the incorrect thing to accomplish his goal, destroy evil. That is what drives him, and the mask is a symbol of their death. The whole ordeal ends with the massacre and the death of the imitator and the man debating the prime minister, using a giant blade that pops out of the wheelchair and impaling him, running the bull style, while all of Japan sees it go down live. Nothing is left but a bunch of blood and corpses, and the nation is in silence. Quote, Akumetsu's way of thinking and actions were not something acceptable within cooperative society.
Of course.
Still, people were succumbing to his logic, and in one instant had internalized it. Akumetsu had driven this country of Japan from its perpetual wallowing in death, and the destruction of evil, and his main purpose for existing. I think the mystery of the character is intriguing, and his antics are fun to watch in a revenge porn sort of way, and the idea behind a character like Akumetsu really does present itself with an interesting discussion. Still, there is a bit of a disconnect where Akumetsu feels like a force of nature and not a character with tangible, relatable goals, until we get the backstory and origins of how he came to be, and the kill that stuck with me even more when I did the research behind it. For those that want to avoid spoilers, I would suggest checking out this other video, but leaving a like before you go would be appreciated. For the rest of y'all, the origins of Sho and the multiple of him that seem to never end ties into my favorite kill in the entire story. It isn't the most flashy or over-the-top of all his performances, especially in comparison to an actual concert show he does, or when he gets one of them in a boxing ring and goes prime Mike Tyson, but it's the one that felt the most real and finally attached itself to the character. It is revealed that Sho was close friends with Kitsuragi, who asked Sho what he would do if he were to die tomorrow. Sho comically asks if he could be granted a week, and Katsuragi asks about revenge, showing him a man that he believes to be evil or the former mafia boss, quote-unquote. Show says getting rid of one man isn't enough. The entire infrastructure of the organization needs to be wiped out or nothing really gets done because he'll be replaced. It is then revealed that Katsuragi is dying from cancer, a liver cancer that was formed by contracting hepatitis via contamination. Katsuragi was born with this big-ass word of a disease,
Time out.
hepatitis via contamination. Katsuragi
Can we acknowledge the Japanese Danny's?
he was born with this big-ass word of a disease, which means via contamination.
Let me read it.
Katsuragi was born with this big
congenital fibrinogenemia.
gas word of a disease, which means he lacks the protein that will allow his blood to harden. So if he bleeds, he won't stop bleeding.
He'll bleed
to
out.
counteract this, he was injected with
fibrinogen concentrate.
Go ahead. You read this and pronounce it properly the first time. Fibrinogen concentrate, who even, whatever. A substance that was found to be contaminated with hepatitis C, and thus, through unfortunate circumstances, contracted it and developed cancer. Given the context this series likes to base things on very real people and circumstances in Japan, I wonder if this was made up perchance. Quote, in 1977, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration revoked all licenses for fibrinogen concentrate because of the risk of hepatitis infection and suspected a lack of effectiveness. However, in Japan, fibrinogen concentrate was used routinely for treatment of obstetric bleeding until 1988. Even in 1997, academic texts by Japanese authorities and obstetrics still recommended that obstetricians use the product. An estimated 10,000 cases of hepatitis C infection are attributable to the use of fibrinogen in Japan. The article then says, and are a result of authoritarianism that hindered effective policy changes. Scientists have a duty to refine repeatedly the quality of their evidence, and policymakers need to adjust existing policies continually to accord with the latest scientific evidence. End quote. This isn't unique to Japan, as there have been other scandals such as here in the United States, especially
100%.
during the 80s, in regards to contamination for blood treatments. Yeah, the 80s overall was not the best time to have blood issues. For those of y'all that know what broke out in the 80s, shout out Magic Johnson. This in particular is directly tied to the story, however. Katsuragi has accepted that he is going to die in an attempt to take his own life, but is then pushed out of the way by Sho, who is seemingly killed in an accident. But Sho gets up and drives off into the night. But in the morning, he is walking around as if nothing happened. It is then finally revealed that Sho is a clone of an evil genius called Hiroshi Jinguji, the ringleader of the black market and a brilliant scientist that learned how to continue his life via cloning and memory transfer. Sho, upon learning...
cloning and memory transfer, right? So this is semi-immortality. You know, as long as there are clones, then this person has traded themselves to be immortal. Interesting.
This becomes super existential and falls into despair, wondering what's the point of his existence. But how is it that Sho isn't full of evil?
Continue somebody
long
else's.
Story short, there was a perfect version of the clones known as the Ubermensch, as it is referenced in the story that he killed an evil one a while back, and the clones that were left were all babies, hence why Sho isn't older. Jinguji's plan was to create superhumans and spread his influence across the world, but that plan was foiled, and now Sho is left with all of these other versions of himself in a clone plant to avenge his fallen friend and obliterate the system that killed him. This finally leads to the former Minister of Health being kidnapped and injected with the concentrate. He cries saying the people who died had bad luck, and Sho says he had bad luck also then. The display of rage and then immediately calming down with a somber expression shows how personal this is in comparison to the previous killings. Akumetsu says that 43 individuals were chosen, the most responsible for the push of the concentrate in the 80s to be injected, which caused the death of 43 individuals. It took 3 days then to find the place where these individuals were being held by Akumetsu, and by then they had passed away due to their heavy injuries. Again, not the most flashy and gruesome of all the deaths, not even close, but given all the context we are given as the reader, it felt as if one of the heaviest. The story continues on with Akumetsu's quest to destroy as much evil as he can, including himself given the origins of where he came from. I think it's a story that has one of my absolute favorite main characters ever that carries the show, while presenting an interesting theme that blurs the line hard with reality, making us wonder if we actually had the ability to change things, how would we go about it? Because it's easy to talk and just be a grifter online. But sadly, due to its lack of popularity and the subject matter of going GTA mission on Japanese politicians, I doubt this will ever get an anime. I'm willing to wager my own life on it. All the more reason for you to check it out for yourself. If you like these videos, make sure to turn on the bell notification, and if you want to support the channel and join weekly watch parties, make sure to check out the Patreon. As always, this has been the Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting manga, and I appreciate you submitting this in the Discord. I believe this was Karuto that sent this in. Yeah, thank you, Karuto, for sending this in. Definitely interesting manga. Uh, stuff like this is inherently deep, right? Talking about taking out political, you know what I'm saying? For it to get an anime, I don't think would ever happen. But at the same time, what would happen if it was created? I feel like there would be a lot of political discourse, not just online, but in the real world about this. Because like his message, right? When they had the massacre, he came out and said, "Yes, I am crazy. Yes, I am a hypocrite. But yes, I am destroying evil, and yes, I will end up dying at the end of this night. And that's my life, and that's who I am." Of course, people, if you say something like that, that profound, saying, "Yeah, I'm going to end my like, bro, you're of course gonna change people, of course, because there are some people that they feel lost or they feel like they don't have a purpose or whatever. And on top of that, other people are gonna hear the message and say, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe the world does deserve this." And yeah, maybe some crazy stuff will happen, man, because there's some crazy people out here. So yeah, I think it's an interesting manga. I definitely wouldn't advise people to do stuff that happened in it, but I can get the sentiment on why people would want or fantasize about doing these things because there are people in this world that have the power to basically end people's lives, whether uh, personally or involuntarily or whatever. Like you signed something off on a paper that ended up injecting thousands of people that have medical issues and they ended up suffering because your negligence or because you want to profit or blase blase. So yeah, it's a deep message, 100%, man. But yeah, it's interesting, 100% interesting, and I would be inclined to check out more manga like this, especially if they're talking about things that are currently going on in this world. But it is what it is, man. It is what it is. It's a great video. Thank you, Mass Man, for creating it and sharing it. Thank you, Karuto, for sending it in the Discord. Hit like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.